Welcome, everyone, to the Nerd Journey Podcast, episode number 63. We're joining you every week to talk IT career progression and bring you the advice we wish we'd been given earlier on in our careers. I'm your host, John White, at BJourneyman on Twitter, joined by my co-host, Nick Cordy, at NetworkNerd_. Hey, Nick, how's it going?
Hey, John, I'm doing great. For the listeners out there, we are pre-sales technical engineers with backgrounds in IT operations. We hope our career discussions will be vendor neutral, relevant across disciplines, and remain timeless. If you're enjoying our content, please drop us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you subscribe. And if you want to get in touch with us, tweet or DM at Nerd Journey. Ultimately, we're just two nerds on a journey.
A journey to virtual enlightenment.
So let's take a trip.
Great, Nick. Hey, this is the second part of our discussion on managing technical communities with Nick Tolstoshev. This time we dove in a little bit deeper on the actual position. What I found interesting in listening back is how much of the career guidance he was talking about specific to that position can actually be generalized out to like pretty much any position that you happen to be in. Although granted that community manager is probably a little bit more isolated and at the margins in most organizations where it actually exists. But I mean, just fighting for budget, locking those things down, having backup people to do your job so you can take a vacation. It just, all the things that he talked about and all the little tactics that he had, I felt like were lessons that we could all learn.
I completely agree. And if you remember, Nick talked to us about his integrated approach to work and personal life in episode 62. Some people like to set strict boundaries there. But in this particular episode, he's going to go deeper through the work-life balance aspect of the community management job. And that was one of my favorite parts. So I won't spoil it. Here we are with part 2 of Nick Tolstoshev.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about that community manager career path. When you get good at something like that, is there like a way that people, reach out and, ask you about, leaving the community management position that you have and, kind of like headhunt for that position when they're looking to start up a community? Or is it more of like an active thing where you have to go convince them that they should be investing in something like that?
So in my case, it's more the former. I've gotten to a position and know enough people. Like, for instance, my current position at Automox was a headhunted one because somebody I worked with and was good friends with at WebRoot, who then left WebRoot and went to Cylance, he was now at Automox. And Automox was talking about starting their online community, and Richard's was like, I've got just the guy for you. So they brought me in, and I talked with them, and they ended up hiring me to build their online community for them. But yeah, the career path is all over the place. A lot of people burn out because it can be a very intense job. So they'll do community management for like 2 or 3 years, and then they're like, I can't do this anymore. A lot of people in that bucket, I think, end up getting into community management as a stepping stone. Like, it's an entry-level job at a company that you can get hired on for. And then you do that for a couple years, and you move on to like support or product development or some other role within the company. But for the people in it for the long haul, yeah, I think you do eventually reach a point where people will come looking for you to either give them advice or build a community for them. And there's community consultants out there who will come in and, help you with your community or help you hire a good community manager if you don't know what you're looking for. But then on the flip side, since there isn't really a community department in most organizations, then, you can't really climb up the corporate ladder unless you want to despecialize out of community management and into a wider role within whatever department you happen to be in. So whether that's marketing or support or heading into the product org.
So you can't become like principal community manager or community management fellow or something like that?
Yeah, you could become principal community manager, but you're not going to be, VP of community or, VP of customer community if there isn't a whole department for that. So, um, and I think that's starting to change. Like a lot more boards are having awareness of online community, and there are some companies that are starting to make a whole department out of it, but that's still relatively new. So the opportunities for that are less.
Yeah, I would imagine, there's this entire movement for startups and, post-funding startups, like where they're looking for all different kinds of metrics to judge like whether this company is going to be a success or not. And I wonder if, active community and engaged, user base could be one of those metrics that, and that maybe would start to be emphasized in building a startup. Like, hey, not only do we have to have like a great product, but we have to have an active group of people who talk to each other and support each other, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's definitely starting to get out there as a differentiator, and it's something that certainly everyone at Automox is very excited about. The customers are excited about it, the board's excited about it, and it's seen as a differentiator because it's a way of multiplying your resources. You can hire 10 salespeople and another 10 marketers to go out and sing your praises and close deals, or you can enlist the help, or not, and you can enlist the help of your fans and customers to go out and spread the word. And maybe you only have to hire half the headcount. And the other thing you get out of communities is stuff you never planned for. Like Spice Rex. I wasn't part of the community plan or roadmap. That just kind of happened.
You're talking about the unofficial that became official
Spiceworks mascot. Yeah.
Mascot. Yeah.
Yes.
The T-Rex that got
Exactly.
named Spice Rex. Yeah. Orange T-Rex, by the way.
Of course.
Yeah. So
gotta be true to colors.
That kind of stuff is always neat. Another cool thing that happened like that was at Logarithm, one of the power users on there decided that he wanted to start an award for the most helpful Logarithm employee. He's like, we're always getting recognized for, helping on the community, but the unsung heroes at the company who are helping us don't always get recognition. So him and the other power users got together and nominated a bunch of employees, and then we made a poll that we opened up to the wider community. And then he, out of his own pocket, paid for a trophy for that award and brought it to the next user conference, and then had me award that on stage to the employee who ended up winning, who was very proud of it. And the fun thing is, and that was the trophy I got to hand out on stage. So it's not the kind of trophy that if it had gone through official channels would have gotten selected, which is always fun.
Well, John laughs himself silly. I was going to ask about the expected time commitment of someone in this role, Nick. It seems like I would guess maybe if you're the only community manager, then it's a big time commitment because the community doesn't stop its activities on weekends.
Right.
Like the work week stops. So how do you balance that if you're in community management versus what the employer's expectation may be?
Yeah. So first piece of advice is, don't make it a hourly paid position because there is a lot of outside work. And again, some people take a more, it's the weekend, it's my time, I'm not checking my email, but I consider it a more holistic kind of way of living my life. So, I'll get stuff that I'll have to handle after hours because you never know when an emergency is going to happen. And in fact, over time, you start to develop a sixth sense for your online community. So you'll get a niggling feeling that, hey, maybe I should go check my emails and see what's going on in the community. And it may be, 9:00 at night. And I just happen to check in when there's something going down, some big flame war or some emergency, and then I can respond to it right then and there and not have to wait until the next day. So yeah, I would say it's definitely something that has a lot of kind of after hours work. Again, in a B2B type community, the traffic tends to be during the workday, which is convenient. But yeah, if it's a more hobbyist community, people are going to be posting evenings and weekends. And then the other thing that helps as a kind of solo community manager is, you will have discovered and kind of developed a network of power users on your community. And once they reach a certain level, you can give them moderator privileges so that if they see something egregious before you do, they can take care of it right away. And then you can just look at all the moderator actions as a backup to make sure nobody did the wrong thing.
It sounds like you're you're describing almost like an IT support role. Where you're like, is there something then about like the minimum size, community management department that you should have, like 2 or 3 people? Like you don't like investing in one person sounds like a recipe for burnout or a neglected community.
Yeah, most places, if they have the budget for a full-time person and a serious community platform, they're ahead of most companies out there. So I don't often have the luxury of being part of a team. The benefit there is, you can go on vacation and have coverage and, or take a sick day or be out with the flu for a week, and you're not having to manage the community while you're recuperating or trying to take a vacation. And what I typically do in those situations is I find someone else within the community or within the company who's really passionate about community, and I kind of have them as my informal backup. And again, it's like building a community is a lot like fishing. You're trying to land kind of the big fish. You're casting your net out there, and people come and go, but then there are the people who are going to stick around and be really big contributors. And that's true both from within your customers, but also from within the company. There's going to be random people in random departments who just get community and love it and will be on there. And those are the people you can develop internally as your backup and your resources, kind of in a skunkworks fashion. It's not through official channels. And I think a lot of that's just because by its nature, community is very very in contrast to a standard organizational structure. It's like there's no barriers to talking to people. It's not like you got to get time on the CEO's calendar to talk to them. You're talking to people from all different walks of life. And similarly, within inside the company, it's like you might become friends with somebody because of a shared interest, or you just get along well, and they may work in some other department. So it's very much a lot of things end up being ad hoc just because of the nature of community, not just because it's underfunded in a lot of cases.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wonder. Man, oh man, you said something there that I had like a deep, interesting question, but I honestly cannot think of what it was because like what you said just last like kind of overrode it. Nick Cordy, say something while I try to recover.
I like the idea of expanding your supportability of the community by leveraging moderators, and
Yep.
you're getting people to freely volunteer their time. They don't get paid for this.
Yep.
At least they didn't in Spiceworks.
Yeah.
They don't get paid to help keep the community, I guess we'll say, in line and up to the standards and rules that are applicable to what you want it to be.
Right.
Because
Yeah,
they care enough.
And that's where the social contract piece of it comes in, at least in my mind, is like, yeah, people are volunteering their time for free, and you could consider them as unpaid employees in some senses. I mean, some people, like we had a guy at Webroot, like he's on disability, and he just, he doesn't have to worry about his day-to-day paycheck because he's unable to work, and he's a Canadian, and they have a good social safety net. And he gives back by just going into online communities and helping people learn about online security and antivirus and how to protect their systems and what to watch out for. And that's what he does all day every day, because that's how he stays busy and engaged, despite not being able to work a full-time day job.
I'm sure not all companies, just want to invest like an infinite amount of money into communities, right? So when you're fighting for budget, how is it that you can measure success of a community, and show that to the organization writ large, that, investing, just a few more resources, even if it's a slice of like, a support person's time, or hey, we should get budget to like dual fund, somebody for support so they can straddle the phones and answer questions, in the community, that kind of thing. What are some of the typical metrics that you can go to the organization with?
Yeah, so a lot of it is showing value to the bottom line. So especially if you have some kind of formal advocacy program where you're spending money, giving swag and flying people into headquarters because they're great community members, you can look at their rate of renewal of the product, and it's like in the high 90s versus whatever the average 78% is for your rest of your customers. So there's that direct benefit, right? The being a engaged community member means you're going to stick around and renew next year, and tell all your friends about it. And the other more tactical metrics, typically you look at number of engaged users. So who are the people that have logged in the last month? You look at your page views, you look at your traffic. You also look at things like, are questions getting answered? So if people come in and ask questions and nobody answers, they're not going to come back and your community is going to die off. So you look at what the reply percentage is. So of the questions that got asked, what percentage got some kind of reply? It might not have fixed their problem, but at least somebody took the time and trouble to come in and be like, hey, let's see if I can troubleshoot this with you or find you an answer. And then what was the next piece? Sorry, my train derailed. My turn. And then the other benefits I typically talk about is things like feedback on the product. So having a idea section of your community where people can suggest features or ask for solutions to a problem that they have or a use case, and then other people can vote those up if they agree, and then you can have conversations in the comments about how we would implement this feature, or what would be the exact benefit, and the product managers can go in there and have that direct conversation. So that's data you wouldn't otherwise have, that you might pay thousands of dollars to a consulting company to run a focus group for you. And with a thriving online community, you can do focus groups on demand, and you can get lots of people to volunteer to either give you off the cuff feedback or something more in depth, like a beta test or a UI design session, or watching somebody use the product interactive session. So that kind of stuff is definitely speaks to the bottom line as well, because there's a lot of initial investment to pay for a full-time salary and a community platform, but those dividends pay off down the road when you're saving thousands of dollars in market research, or not wasting money on an ad campaign that's going to go nowhere.
That's fantastic. And I'm guessing that all those things are things you probably learned after you took the job and didn't necessarily know them when you first started in as a community manager.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was definitely beneficial at Intuit to have a good mentor who knew how things worked and could give me advice and answer questions. But a lot of it's trial by fire. Like one of my first experiences with that was at Intuit on the QuickBooks platform. So they had a team of moderators, and I was one of them. And one of my responsibilities was the QuickBooks for Mac forum, because I had a Mac background and was comfortable with it. And one morning, I think it was like Monday, I got into work at like 7 or 8, and the forum was exploding with people complaining about how all of a sudden a bunch of files had gotten deleted off of their desktops. And it turns out it was QuickBooks for Mac that was causing this to happen. So I was the first person to see this go down. So I got the product manager for the Mac product on the phone and, sounded the alarm bells, and he figured out what was causing the problem and got it stopped. And then there was all the questions on the forum, like, A, what should I do? Do I turn off my computer or do I leave it running? If I turn it off, maybe it'll wipe some files and do some garbage collection at shutdown, which will make it harder to recover those files. Or in this case at the time, the Macs would do garbage collection in the background. So there may be a time limit on how long it can be before you can recover those files before they get wiped by the system or overwritten as free disk space. So we had to kind of figure out on our own what advice to give people. And then we were kind of like PR until PR kind of stepped in and was like, shut down all communication. And they took the typical PR role of like no communication at all, except for some short, ambiguously worded statement. And then it was like radio silence for like a week or two until, the folks at Intuit figured out what to do, which in the end was offering data recovery services for people. But again, that's hit or miss as to whether it was successful. And it ended up being kind of so poorly handled that I think there was a class action lawsuit that stemmed out of it. I mean, this was, Mac users running their small business. So I'm a photographer with my Mac and I'm using QuickBooks for my accounting. And I store all of my photo downloads in a single folder on the desktop because I don't know any better and I don't have any backups. And QuickBooks just deleted my entire life's work that's on this one computer. So you can imagine how upset people were.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Oh,
But yeah, that I was getting like quoted in newspaper articles, like stuff I would post on the forum would end up with my name and quotes on it in articles about this disaster because it did make the news. So at that point I was like, oh, I really better know what I'm doing here because, whether QuickBooks intended it or not, I'm kind of the de facto PR person until PR steps in. So you have to kind of learn how to handle those situations. And now I'm much better prepared. So anytime I go into a new company, I'm like, all right, do you have a disaster plan? If not, let's write one and figure out all the people that we need to call and have some policies in place around, how often are we going to communicate with people through which channels, updating them on, whatever's happened, whether it's a data breach or, the CEO got in a car wreck. It's like there could be any number of disasters that would be, affecting the company you work for that somebody's going to have to keep the public informed about. Otherwise, it just turns into rampant speculation.
Wow. That's great information. I totally understand the learning trial by fire. One thing I was going to ask you, Nick, if I'm someone who is super technical in my day to day, like really enjoy working with the technology, but really enjoy interacting with people and participating in communities, and I make the move to community manager, how I'm not going to be able to be as technical as I was, is what it sounds like to me. What advice would you give me there?
Yeah, so your technical skills won't stay as sharp, and you'll definitely get out of touch with technology. Like I left the IT world before virtualization was a big thing, and now it's something that's part of every IT person's day-to-day life, and that's the technology I missed out, on getting to see and directly experience and get my hands dirty with. But it's certainly a role where I still manage to keep the technical side. So, for instance, I took a break from technology and went to help launch a community for professional cannabis growers and dispensary owners. And the whole company was the community platform. So it was a kind of invite-only community for people who were professionals in the business. And since it was a startup of three of us, I was doing all the tech work on maintaining the community platform and making sure it was backed up and dealing with any technical issues that arose, and also making sure, that we had good backups and that they were tested restores, and working with integrating stuff from the community into other products, like getting the little intercom widget working on the page, or sending data back to our CMS from the community when people registered. So that part of it, I get to still be technical. And then the other part of it, and this is not necessarily something that every community manager does, but I find it hugely useful for me and I recommend it, which is to get very familiar with the product and get very hands-on with it. So, for instance, at Automox, one of the things they wanted an online community for is, even though this is a platform for patch management, you can also push out code snippets and scripts to all your endpoints. So they wanted a community as a place where people could share the stuff they've written with each other and have this kind of library of code snippets that work through Automox. And part of what I did to help get that going was, get my hands dirty writing some code myself, and getting the community to say, hey, I really wish I had a script to solve this problem. Like I want to make sure all of the users on my remote laptops that aren't in an Active Directory, I want to force them to change their password. Can you write a script to do that for me? So that was something where I get to get my hands dirty and do some technical work, and that's always fun. And it also provides great feedback to the company because I'm now a customer using the product. So I've got firsthand knowledge where I can say, well, this part was really confusing and this part didn't work the way the manual said it does. And, support says it's supposed to do one thing, but when I tried it out, it did another. So it gets that kind of independent point of view within the company when you become a user of the product as part of being a community manager.
And it also, in my mind, provides a way back if you ever wanted to go into a more technical role. It keeps your chops well versed enough to adapt to that.
Yeah. And the other thing is, like, the troubleshooting mindset never goes away. It's something that you always bring to the table of like, well, let's break it down. How is this supposed to work? Where is it failing? Let's narrow down the problem space and start testing some hypotheses. And it's like those skills are invaluable whether you stay in a technical role in IT or whether you're trying to solve, different or wider problems within the company in a different role.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Are there any maybe final thoughts that you might have as far as, career recommendations that you can make with getting involved in, community activism and, advocacy groups that maybe people might have missed?
I would say if it's a career that you're interested in, make sure that it's something you're doing as a hobby. So I would have no problem hiring someone as a community manager who was a volunteer moderator on a forum about whatever their hobby is. Could be snowboarding, could be whatever. But if they have that mindset where they enjoy it and they do it of their own free will, they have that intrinsic motivation. The skills and the other stuff you can teach, but you're going to have that interest. So I would say before you jump into a career switch, do that for two reasons. One, to see if you like it. And two, you'll get some background and experience that you can actually use on your resume and use as a way to get into the field, because there is definitely a demand for community managers out here. I know that talent out here in Colorado is pretty tight. So it's a great time if you're wanting to make a career switch to kind of make that jump. And then the other thing that was true for me and probably for a lot of people is a lot of times it's easier to make a career transition from within inside a larger company than to start as a newbie somewhere, especially since a lot of places, only have the one community manager role. So it might be hard to find a junior community manager opening. So doing that as an internal transfer to another team a lot of times, or just, if you are interested in that and your company already has a community manager, become one of those informal people I talked about who participate on the community because they love it. And then I'll just end up training you in community management and making you my informal backup when I go on vacation. And that's some good experience you can put on your resume.
Yeah, that reminds me so much of Jimmy T's episode where he talked about running the Minecraft community and doing a lot of that same stuff. It's interesting. He didn't actually go into community management, but he definitely has the skills. So much relatable experience in all these different things we do, whether it's personal or for our full-time job.
Yep. And even if you don't end up becoming a community manager, you definitely learn some great skills that are going to work in any role. And I like to tell people that I feel that community management is the purest form of leadership because you don't have any leverage. Like your boss has your paycheck over your head. You don't do what he or she says, then your career may be over, or you may be fired. So you're going to do what they say, even if you don't think it's a good idea, or if they're not particularly inspiring in their speech to try and get you on board. You're going to be like, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, I'll get right on that. So in the community, if I try and be heavy-handed and tell you to do this or else, you're going to be like, I'll go somewhere else and hang out in some other online community. So you really have to develop those key leadership skills of motivating people and inspiring them and getting them on board for something that's not at all tied to money. And those are skills that you need even when you are someone's boss and you're paying their salary, because they found that you're not going to have happy employees unless you are actually motivating and inspiring them. If you're just telling them what to do because you're the boss, then you're going to end up with some pretty subpar performance.
That's a really good definition of leadership, actually. Getting people to do things without, the leverage of money or their job or their future in your hands.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, whether we end up in a future with universal basic income or whether we end up in one with killer robots, with the killer robot side, we don't have to worry. None of us will have jobs because we'll all be dead. But in a world where everybody's basic needs are met, how do you enlist people to help you with a project or something you feel inspired and passionate about? You're going to have to enlist those people without, handing them money, because they've already got that covered. And there's a fascinating book on this by a writer called Cory Doctorow, who's also a blogger on Boing Boing. And he wrote a book called Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom, which is about the near future where there is universal basic income, like anybody has an apartment and their healthcare and their basic food needs met. But if you want any luxury goods, you want a fancy mansion, you have to earn currency. And the currency in that book is earned by people appreciating what you do. So every time I look at a painting that you painted, you get currency from me. Every time you read a book that I may have written or a blog post, I get currency from you. And everybody's wearing these kind of augmented reality goggles to keep track of all this. So it's an economy of attention. And the currency he calls Wuffy, which is a nice silly name for it. But it's the story of a project of restoring Disney World to its 20th century glory, and how he enlists the help of all these people to come together and do this project. And he rises to fame and has his 15 minutes of fame. And then I won't spoil any of the rest of it. But it's a book I think about often when I'm doing community management, in that terms of attentional economy and that kind of social contract.
Oh man, I must have passed that book so many times in a bookstore. Okay, showing my age again.
He offers it as a free download on his website. So he, interestingly, showing the value of community, he said when he would offer his books for sale on Amazon in print form or in Kindle format, but also for free on his website, he would get more sales from people actually buying his book from the free downloads, because people would recommend it to their friends or tell others about it or want to teach it in a course. And so that became a mechanism for him to get the word out.
That is fascinating.
Yeah. There's a couple good writers out there writing about some of those impacts on a societal level. And Cory Doctorow's one, and another guy is named Clay Shirky. He's written about some of the transformative effects of online communities and social media. So, and I think he actually teaches at NYU, teaches one of the few courses out there on online community and the impact of that.
Awesome. Hey, Nick, thank you so much for your time. It's been eye-opening from start to finish.
Absolutely, yes.
Really appreciate your time. And is there a way that users can follow, our listeners can follow your social media presence, or how do you go about that?
Yeah, so because my last name Tolstoshev is unique, that's pretty much my handle on everything. So Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, what have you. All my gamer tags on all the various networks are Tolstoshev. That's spelled Tolstoshev. So if you Google that, you'll either find me or science articles that my parents have written. So it's a strange mixture of biotech from my parents' work and funny pictures of me in Spiceworks costumes or on stage in a yellow tuxedo at Spice World.
Awesome. Nick, thanks again so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Oh, and I should plug the company I'm working for. So if you go
yeah.
to community.automox.com, we've got you covered in terms of talking about patch management and automating that. So if you want to come check out what I'm doing today, that's where I hang out most of the time.
Very cool. We'll definitely dive into that. Excellent. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Community management's definitely a career option for the technology pro, John. And from what Nick was saying, it sounds like you can be as technical as you want to be.
Yeah, I think that's a choice that all of us have in anything that we're doing. I do like thinking about that work-life balance and boundary drawing. As someone who's actually like been in town with Nick Tolstoshev and met up with him, although I didn't, sleep on his couch. But it was a kind of a cool discussion to listen to and hear his philosophy on. I just, in general, I really miss that guy. I don't know what else to say. I love chatting with smart people with interesting, relevant things to say. And, we need to do more of that.
We do. And speaking of relevance, I can't think of anything more relevant to this conversation right now than the John White School of Mentoring. If you're out there and you're in need of some guidance, mentorship, there's no greater resource out there. Send that tweet out to @NerdJourney today for pricing and packaging.
Okay. Anything else pop in your mind before we get out of here?
No, sir. Just a reminder that we want people to subscribe and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. We want to know if we're being helpful and are always looking for interesting questions to ponder. We're collectively on Twitter @NerdJourney.
All right. Farewell, listeners. Tune in next time as the journey continues. I'm John White @BeatJourneyman, for Nick Cordy @NetworkNerd_, signing off.
Adios.